Steelers may be without one of their best players on Sunday as the Browns look to play spoiler to them winning the AFC North. We'll talk about it coming up on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Steelers.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, Browns fans? How you living, Steelers fans? I'm Spencer German, Christopher Carter alongside, and we got for you a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Steelers on Christmas. Nonetheless, Merry Christmas to you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, which wouldn't be possible without you making our shows your first listens every single day. Lot to talk about as the Browns and Steelers collide in Week 17. Could DK Metcalf be MIA for this game? Plus, Myles Garrett's quest for the single-season sack record is on the line. And can he do it with TJ Watt potentially watching? And we'll talk about some key matchups, paths to victory, and much, much more. Do want to remind you, though, of course, that Crossover Thursdays are presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I think this conversation, Chris, has to start with the big news that obviously came down early this week after the Steelers and Lions game. Big win for the Steelers, obviously, in Detroit. But the aftermath of that is that DK Metcalf gets into a skirmish with a fan, throws a punch, and he's issued a 2-game suspension. As of recording this, it's still 2 games.
Accurate with our words, there was no punch thrown. He
Okay.
grabbed a person by their shirt and let them go. That is, I think that's one of the things that keeps coming out of this is that the wrong thing is being said, and I think that's very important to how we talk about that.
Very fair, and very important distinction there. But the altercation, as of recording this, has given him the league has given him a 2-game suspension. We know he's in the appeal process. We'll see what that necessitates. I have no doubt that he's not going to miss Week 18 against the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think the league's going to do that, but there is a chance that he at least misses this game this weekend. What's the latest on that, and how do you think this thing kind of plays out?
Well, just for transparency, we're recording this 2 days before Christmas, so this is the day after the suspension was doled out. So if there is an update and we don't have it in this show, that is why. But I, like you, I think this is going to get dropped to a single game. I thought a punishment of some sort might be coming. I thought it was interesting, though, the NFL gave out a bigger suspension for Metcalf than they did Lamar Jackson when he got into it with the fan, when he hit a fan, or when Jamar Chase spit on a player in space. So I thought it was interesting that he got more than both of them combined. But I think the way that punishment was given out, looking at the precedent of when players get into it with fans, this was a very big overstep, I think, by the NFL. The question will be, do they feel like they want to take a step back in this appeal process? But here's the thing. I think even if DK Metcalf wins his appeal and gets it reduced to a game, that game is still the Browns game this week. And so I think the Steelers are preparing to play without him. And I think that what you're probably going to see is a redistribution of how they use the wide receiver position this upcoming week, which may involve Marquez Valdes-Scantling taking the role of running the routes of DK Metcalf, just because he's the closest they have to that kind of build. And then that way they can work in, they can keep Adam Thielen in the wide receiver 2 role he's been in since he joined the team. And they can also kind of work everyone else that they plan in there. There's also the chance, I'm saying this, again on Tuesday morning, but I would not put it past the Steelers to look into trying to sign Allen Lazard in an emergency situation. Yeah. He was released by the Jets and is currently a free agent with no ties to anyone or nothing due to anyone if the Steelers signed him. So it would make sense for the Steelers to make such a move this week. So if it happens before this show, great. Then I look like a prophet. But I think the Steelers have made their hay on offense this year. Going into this week, they are the 11th highest scoring offense, which I don't think that they've been that high since maybe 2017. I'm going to do a quick scroll here. The last time that they were at least 11th or higher in scoring was 2018, and so. Aaron Rodgers has keyed that by distributing the football. 9 different players caught passes last week. DK Metcalf he's the number 1 wide receiver, but he's like Kenneth Gainwell has more catches than him in the season. That's going to be the key for the Steelers in this one, and the Browns are going to have to figure that out. Without DK Metcalf, how does that impact how Aaron Rodgers distributes the football? It's going to be interesting to see the Steelers' offense against what's still a talented Browns defense in this one.
Yeah, listen, that's some great insight into just sort of how the offense gets redistributed or reshuffled a little bit without DK Metcalf out there. And it's funny you bring up Lazard because as soon as I saw he was released last week, I was like, oh, that feels like a bona fide move the Steelers will make for a team that obviously still is looking for wide receiver help, has the familiarity with obviously Aaron Rodgers. So it will be interesting if they add him. And listen, like this is an important absence for the Steelers because last time these two teams played, they made a point in getting the ball to DK Metcalf. He ended up finishing that game with 4 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown. And that was actually the first game that Tyson Campbell was playing corner for the Steelers, or for the Browns rather, after they made that trade with the Jaguars. And it was evident that they were targeting his side of the field and staying away from Denzel Ward and going to DK Metcalf in that game. So I do think this changes the math a little bit, but listen, the Browns have had some issues stopping the run right now on defense, on top of the fact that their offense has just continued to be inept. And so I don't think it maybe levels the playing field slightly, but to your point, the Steelers are putting up a lot of points, and so the Browns are going to have to answer that offensively themselves. One of the other big storylines in this one, Chris, obviously, is Myles Garrett's quest to break the single-season sack record. It's one of the only things Browns fans really have to look forward to at this point. And I actually think it's kind of fun, and from my standpoint, that he didn't actually get it this past weekend against the Bills. He really wanted to get it done. He only gets a half sack, and it was this weird scoring change that they made. And so he's sitting just a half sack shy of tying the record that TJ Watt and Michael Strahan obviously share, and a whole sack away from breaking it. And I think the opportunity to do it against the Steelers, who he didn't get a sack against earlier this season against Aaron Rodgers, and maybe in front of TJ Watt if he's able to play in this game, or even if he at least travels with the team or whatever, I think is kind of a fun sort of storyline to this one, that he gets a chance to do it against this team at home with TJ Watt potentially looking on. I love the sort of way this is set up. And I know he wants to get it done in 16 games too, because everybody else has done it in 16 games. He doesn't want to need that 17th game to break the what the record is right now.
Well, the other thing here, too, is that he gets a great opportunity. The Steelers are down to their 4th-string left tackle in Dylan Cook, a guy who was undrafted, a guy who will be making his 3rd career start in this game. He allowed a sack to Aiden Hutchinson this past week. But Dylan Cook has also played well. I'm not gonna dog him because, with all of that, he has really stepped up in a big ways. Last week, he only allowed 1 sack to Aiden Hutchinson. He did allow 4 pressures, but the Steelers slid a lot of protection his way to help him. But he also did a good job in the run game. And I think one thing that could be an underrated storyline in this game is how the Steelers' offensive line has truly been coming up this year. Even with all the injuries, you have not just Broderick Jones, but the backup left tackle, Calvin Anderson, he went down, and Andres Pete went down for a time. That's what put Dylan Cook at left tackle. When Pete returned from injury, Isaac Seumalo, their starting left guard, went down, and Pete had to fill in there. And so they've got the entire left side being backups, protecting Aaron Rodgers on his blind side. But Zach Frazier, the center, has had a really strong year. Mason McCormick, a 4th-round pick from last year, 2nd-year player, he is looking really strong. Troy Fautanu might be the best of the offensive linemen at right tackle. Yeah. He's playing phenomenally. And that crew now has had back-to-back weeks where they've been able to run the football on teams, and where it looked like for a little bit maybe the run game was disappearing. They ran for 135 against the Dolphins. They ran for 230 yards against the Lions, and that's where I think that they're going to try to make this game work. They want to protect Aaron Rodgers. The Steelers aren't cocky in that they're trying to leave Aaron Rodgers in the pocket for 8 seconds to let him just throw the ball around. They'd love to be able to do that, but they know when they're going up against elite pass rushers, they know that Myles Garrett's there. They've played him many times. I mean, you've seen the Steelers take him on. They've had to deal with Myles Garrett with Dan Moore Jr. as their left tackle for 4 or 5 years. So the Steelers, I think, are going to have a plan to limit Myles Garrett. I I wouldn't be shocked if he tied or broke the record in this game just because all the things they have to make work. But I also think the Steelers are going to put a considerable plan to make this game about continuity in the Browns defense and trying to play the run and trying to take away and having to communicate in different ways to limit the Steelers from safer plays. And then I think they're also going to bank on a defense that over the past 3 weeks has been playing a lot better football.
Yeah, listen, I there's a lot that is going to be working against Myles Garrett in this game, and I actually think the Bills showed you a blueprint of how to sort of protect your quarterback. They did a really good job of basically anytime they were rolling out Josh Allen, it was to his right. It was away from Myles. There was times where it seemed like he kind of sensed he was in the pocket a little too long, and he would just bolt out of the pocket because he knew Myles is coming at some point. I got to get out of here. And there's also the fact, like you said, the Steelers have run the football so well. Bills did that really well on Sunday, and it didn't create as many opportunities for Josh Allen to even have to drop back and pass. And that obviously limits the ability for Myles Garrett to get after the quarterback. And then there's also the factor that Aaron Rodgers has historically been one of the best quarterbacks in terms of getting rid of the football quickly. And that, I think, showed itself in that first matchup where Myles Garrett didn't have a sack against Aaron Rodgers because he was just so quick getting rid of that ball, and he didn't have a lot of time to sort of get back there and disrupt things. So all those things kind of come into play and converge at once. We need to talk about some key matchups in this game. Some of them might revolve around Myles Garrett. We'll talk about that coming up next on a crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Steelers. Our crossover Thursdays are brought to you by Prize Picks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. There's bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. Lock in your lineup and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. And then the new Stacks feature lets you choose the same player up to 3 times in one lineup, like more on Shedeur Sanders' passing yards, touchdowns, and rushing yards if you so choose. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot feature saves your lineup from a loss. Boy, do I wish other fantasy apps had that. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL. To get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's going to be right. All right, we get you some key matchups now as we turn the page and continue talking about Browns and Steelers coming on down the pike this weekend on Sunday from Cleveland. And for me, you already sort of talked about the area that I always sort of focus on when I do these segments each week, Chris, is just the offensive line and how they're going to handle Myles Garrett because he's the focal point of this Browns team and this Browns defense. I think you highlighted very well what the game plan is going to sort of be. The fact that Dylan Cook has played pretty well, despite being, their 4th option at left tackle this season. He's kind of held his own. And we know, like, Myles Garrett's seen everything at this point. He's seen the double teams. He's seen chips from tight ends. He's seen sometimes 3 linemen or multiple tight ends in a lineman try to block him. But that is, I think, where everything sort of starts for the Browns is his ability to disrupt the game. Now, that also gets taken away if the Steelers can run the football. So I think, like, across the board this week, the Browns just need to be better up front. Like the Bills were averaging, I think, like over 8 yards per carry running between the tackles last week. And so, yes, that defensive line and how they're able to get after the passer is going to be a factor in this one. But I think it's also going to be imperative that entire group sort of lifts up Myles. And since they lost Malik Collins, it's been a problem. Mason Graham needs to step up. Whatever rotation of guys in the middle, they didn't have Mike Hall Jr. this past week. Those guys need to do a better job of sort of solidifying some of those holes and closing them up because the Steelers, as we saw against the Lions this past week, can run the football effectively. And if they're going to do that all game, then that's going to render Myles Garrett largely useless in this game.
And the Steelers are doing it in not so conventional ways. The Steelers have a dual running back punch that I don't think even anyone in Pittsburgh anticipated to be what it's become.
I did not expect Gainwell to be he's been awesome for them. Like he's been incredible.
Spectacular. Like you're like Browns fans, you're gonna YouTube Kenneth Gainwell and see that catch that he made against the Lions last week and be like, that looks amazing. But you also need to look at how hard this guy runs and how quick he is in space and how often he makes guys miss. And then you have to look at Jaylen Warren and the two of them being home run hitters who can make guys miss in space. Sorry, just breathing issues. But the thing here is that the Steelers are going to be using those guys in so many different ways to try to catch the Browns in places where they're just leaning them to the wrong gap, the wrong way at the wrong time. They're also, over the past 3 weeks, they've been working in Jonnu Smith as an extra running back. They've been leaving Caleb Johnson, their third round rookie from this past draft. They've been leaving him out so that they could put Jonnu Smith in and rotating him into a running back position. And what you saw in this last game against the Lions, plays where he would line up in the backfield and then Kenneth Gainwell would rotate out to like the slot, and then they would put Kenneth Gainwell in motion. And then you had to choose, or do you cover Gainwell in the jet sweep, or do you cover Jonnu Smith out the backfield? Because Jonnu Smith can scoot. He's a tight end, but when he gets the ball in his hands, he can move and he can make guys miss. He's also big. There's going to be some interesting things at play here for the Steelers the rest of the season. That when I talked to Kenneth Gainwell about that on Monday when the Steelers got back in the locker room after the game, he said that Arthur Smith has had a lot of things in the works this year that they still are just now revealing. And so I think one thing that Steelers are kind of looking at right now is they know that without DK Metcalf, they might have to reach further into that bag of tricks. If I'm the Browns, I'm going to have to teach run discipline and gap integrity a lot this week, because the Steelers are going to try to test you, to stretch you out. The Steelers love their athleticism on the line. Frazier, McCormick, Valtanu, and even the backups. They really like Dylan Cook. These guys can move. These guys can work in space. They can get to the second level. They can pull and hit. And they are, again, they're not afraid to use their tight ends. Their receivers block really well. Adam Thielen has been a really good blocker for them. Ben Skoranek is a guy who's probably going to get a good amount of snaps without DK Metcalf in this game. He's another really good blocker. This game's going to be about physicality. And if the Steelers or Browns, whoever can win that physicality is going to have a major edge in this game.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up the running back sort of tandem there, because that was going to be another area that I sort of looked at, was like those two running backs in Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, and whatever defender they're matched up against. If Gainwell, who they've done so many different things with, is split out wide, like, okay, who's guarding him? Who's on him? Who is going to cover him? Is it going to be Carson Schlesinger? Like those matchups are going to be so critical in this game. And then just in the run game, more specifically, tracking those guys down, making sure they don't have big games. Like, who's going to be able to come in and make those tackles? Is it a safety? Is it Grant Delpit from the third level? Is it Carson Schlesinger from the second level? Being able to tackle those guys, which has been an issue for the Browns the last couple weeks, is going to be pivotal in this football game, because the Steelers are clearly sort of gaining confidence when it comes to running the football entering this game. Chris, what's another area or matchup that you got your eyes on as you get ready for this one on Sunday?
Another area I'm going to be looking at in this game is the secondary the Steelers have, because it's been banged up as well against Shedeur Sanders and how they're going to try to get him into some mistakes. The Steelers at the start of this year thought that their secondary was going to be a lot of single high, a lot of man coverage, cover three, with Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, and Joey Porter Jr. We're working on islands with a single high safety and Juan Thornhill. And pretty much most of those names are either gone from the team or they're in a different position. Jalen Ramsey's now playing free safety for the Steelers. They brought in Kyle Duggar at strong safety to replace the injured Deshaun Elliott. Joey Porter Jr. has turned into a very good number one cornerback. In fact, out of qualifying cornerbacks, he has the third best passer rating allowed in the NFL. And then James Pierre, an undrafted guy who's been on the practice squad up and down for years on the Steelers roster. He's been playing really well at cornerback. He missed last week with an injury, but I think he might be back this week. And then Asante Samuel Jr. has been the guy filling in behind him. Brandon Eccles, really good as a slot cornerback. He got hurt this last game. His status for this game will be very interesting to watch. But that group has been really good at taking away primary receivers, especially I'd say over the past month or so. They have, really, you look back, I think maybe since the Chargers game, the secondary really hasn't been the problem for the Steelers. They've gotten beat by a couple good plays from the Caleb Williams made some really good plays with that passing offense, but I think we see how serious the Bears are as a threat. The Bills, more so the Steelers, got run over up front, and I wrote a story in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette about how Patrick Queen said that after that Bills game there was a big talk amongst the defense about how accountability needs to change. And since then, you've seen the defense have a really good game against the Ravens, a really good game against the Dolphins, and then a really good game against the number one offense in the NFL and the Lions. And so if the Steelers, it's a shame that Quinshon Judkins had the injury that he had, because I thought he was a phenomenal player coming out of college. He was someone I was looking at for the Steelers in the draft. But if the Steelers are able to limit Dylan Sampson and the rest of the Browns' run game and make this about Shedeur Sanders, this could play into a Steelers defense that's been playing a much more coordinated effort to limit the pass and to get after the quarterback in different ways. It's not just, even if TJ Watt doesn't play this game, it's not just TJ Watt anymore and Cam Heyward. Cam Hayward's been still making great plays, but Alex Highsmith has been ramping it up this year. Nick Herbig, when he's been healthy, has been big. Even rookie Jack Sawyer had 4 pressures last week against the Lions, and he was going up against Penei Sewell quite a bit. Derrick Harmon has been better. Keanu Benton's been better. This Steelers defensive front is having a bit of a youth movement in the players that they've injected into it and how they're stepping up this season.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's funny. Steelers and Browns are arch rivals. We know that. And Browns fans watching this are, fuming just thinking about having to play the Steelers this week, and they really want to see this team get a win. But I'll tell you, we've been on the same wavelength with all these sort of these key matchups, because I'm right there with you. Like last week, it was very much about the Browns' run game and what they were going to be able to do against the Bills, who have had a bad run defense this year. This week, it's the opposite. It's a Steelers secondary that has had some down moments and struggles at times, and has been susceptible to giving up some bigger plays. And Shedeur Sanders likes to take those chances down the field. So if he can protect the football and throw it around a little bit and put up some numbers, there's absolutely a chance that the Browns can win this football game. But the question is going to be like, is he going to have the time to do that? Is he going to be able to continue to get better as he's tried to progress? Like sometimes he holds the ball a little too long. Sometimes he just doesn't see things as fast as other quarterbacks. Obviously, he's a rookie. That's fine. Those things happen. But he kind of is the pivotal piece of this game. And for a quarterback that's trying to convince the Browns, hey, I can be the guy for you next year and be your franchise quarterback, I think this game is going to be really important. There's like a saying in Cleveland that you're not really a Cleveland Brown until you beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if he gets a chance to ball out, I think he's going to try to jump at that opportunity to try to put out a good performance and potentially lift the Browns to victory, because that is the area that I think they have the most chance of having some success in this football game, and especially without Quinshon Judkins. But we'll see, because Travion Williams and Raheem Sanders had some success running the football, so we'll see if they're able to replicate that against a really good or a pretty good Steelers run defense. But yeah, I think Shedeur Sanders is absolutely going to be a pivotal piece of this matchup on Sunday. All right, we got to get to some paths to victory for both these teams. We'll get to that here coming up on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Steelers. Final part of the conversation here on this crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Steelers. We talk about some paths to victory for both of these football teams. And I'll let you have the floor here first, Chris, because I know I took it last time. But I think for the Browns, a lot of this has to start with. I think a lot of this does start with like whether or not DK Metcalf is playing or not, and whether or not they can stop the Steelers' run game that's been so effective, especially in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is going to depend on that. If the Steelers run game gets loose, it's going to make it really hard for Myles Garrett to have an impact on the game. If the Steelers run game is going, it's also going to, I think it's going to be right where the Steelers want. They're going to, this is the team that honestly, I think they've wanted to be able to be all season, but they knew that this is going to be a bumpy road this season. They knew that the offensive line was going to take time. And we said this all season long on the Locked On Steelers podcast, that the big thing for this season was, can this offensive line take a step up this year? Can you get to the end of the season feeling like, hey, this is not just a unit trying to find its way anymore. This is now an above average unit that's on its way to maybe being an elite unit in a couple of years. And I think that they've taken steps in that direction. I think by all metrics, they become at least one, when you look at pressure percentage and sacks allowed, I think that they are one of the top pass protection units in the NFL right now when it comes to that. And then on top of that, now you're getting the run game going. This could really be a situation for the Steelers that becomes the offensive line being a bigger part of the game. And this is where they've invested a lot of their draft capital in recent weeks. When you look, or recent years, excuse me, you look back to the start of the Omar Khan era, the Steelers' current GM. When he took over in 2023, their first pick was Broderick Jones. Granted, Broderick Jones on injured reserve, but the year after that, they draft Troy Fautanu in the first round, Zach Frazier in the second round, Mason McCormick in the fourth round. They've put a lot of effort into fixing this offensive line because they knew it was a problem. And as they've done that, I think the Steelers have seen growth, but it took time for them to get to this point, right? It took time for them to coalesce, to figure things out. But it's what I said would happen, what happened the last time the Steelers invested this much into an offensive line. In the early 2010s, Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, Marcus Gilbert, Ramon Foster, that crew that became a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, they took time to figure each other out. The thing I always point out to Steelers fans is go back to 2013. It was DeCastro's second year, and on the first drive of the season, he took out Marquise Pouncey's knee, and Pouncey was out for the season. It took time for that group to turn into a really good group, but I think what you're starting to see is this Steelers offensive line is turning into a group that is formidable, and so that's where a big matchup is going to be: is can the Browns' defensive front keep those guys in check and win at the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, and that's been a problem, like I said, without Malik Collins out there the last couple of weeks. I think they've missed him dearly as that sort of presence in the middle of this defensive line, playing alongside Myles, playing alongside Mason Graham, playing alongside the rotation of like Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire. It's been a real issue. I talked about how effective the Bills were running the football between the tackles. That's part of the reason why. So I think you're right. Like everything in this game feels like it starts with the Steelers' run game. Can the Browns stop it effectively and enough? And if not, they could be in for a long day. I think conversely, the Browns have to find a way to stay on the football field and put together some longer drives, and that's probably going to take Shedeur Sanders delivering some heroics. You feel a little bit better if TJ Watt isn't playing in this game about him being able to sort of have some time in the pocket, not have him bearing down on him. But that Steelers defensive line is still a tall task. They're a really good group. So, he has to be aware of kind of his surroundings, what's going on. I thought Shedeur did a really good job this past week of taking kind of what the defense was giving him, and he wasn't just trying to push the ball downfield quite as much. He was taking his checkdowns, and that's okay. Like, that's effective. It can allow you to work down the field. That's going to be so pivotal in this game, and they can't let it spiral the way that it did the first time around. But I'm fascinated to see what the game plan sort of is with Shedeur and what he kind of brings to the table in this one, because that is the one area I think the Browns can maybe have some success, like I mentioned. The other thing I'll say too, and I've brought this up in recent weeks, special teams has cost this team so dearly this season. Whether it's just teams running back kickoffs, not even for touchdowns, but like to midfield to start the opening drive of a game or the opening drive of a half, and that really flips the sort of script. Last week, they had Corey Bojorquez, who's the punter, obviously couldn't handle the snap on a field goal, and so there was a field goal taken off the board right before the half because of that, and that likely they lose 23-20. That's a game time field goal potential when it's all said and done. So every single week I bring this up because you just expect at some point Browns special teams are going to have a lapse, and if they do that against the Steelers team, we know they're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is if you're the Browns, you don't want to get Shedeur Sanders into you want to keep him on schedule. I think that's something that when Kevin Stefanski has gotten the Browns to beat the Steelers and the offense to function, they've kept a quarterback on schedule. They've been able to kind of keep things balanced, keep the Steelers guessing. If this gets to a point where the run game doesn't work and they can't have those on time, scheduled throws that are quick hits into the zone, you're going to start forcing Shedeur Sanders to have to play some sandbox football. And you do not want Shedeur Sanders playing sandbox football. It was great in college, but that's when he starts to make mistakes in the NFL that good defenses can counter on. And listen, I think for a good chunk of the season, the Steelers were not a good defense. They were not playing at a high level. They would even tell you that themselves. They felt that they weren't living up to what they were supposed to. But I think after their loss to the Packers, a few things changed in the defense and how they operated. One, they switched Jalen Ramsey back to safety. They brought in Kyle Duggar. They used a lot more two high safeties. I think they figured some things out there. But then two, they were figuring out how to fix things in the run defense with a lot of new guys and young guys up front. And I think since that loss to the Bills, you've seen that turn around where the Steelers have been able to keep teams contained for the most part. Yes, the Ravens ran for 200 yards in them, but in a way that did not change the game in a huge way. They only allowed the Dolphins to run for a single first down in that game. And then after that, and then the Lions came with a number 5 rushing offense, arguably the best 1-2 running back punch in the NFL.
Yeah, they shut them down.
And they had 15 rushing yards against the Steelers. If the Steelers are able to take away the run and force Shedeur Sanders into predictable 3rd and longs, and they're able to lock in on where the Browns want to get their first and second reads, it could be a rough day for Shedeur. So I think Kevin Stefanski is going to need a heck of a game plan to kind of keep the Steelers off balance and not able to take away his primary reads. And keep Shedeur Sanders on a clock that allows him to stay on schedule and in part of a specific attack plan that protects the football. Because that's the other thing about this Steelers team. They feed off of turnovers. And I think what's kind of interesting about the past few weeks is, the times early in the season when they were playing really well, they forced 5 turnovers against the Patriots and pulled off an upset there. They forced 6 turnovers against the Colts, and before the Colts slide started, before Daniel Jones went down, and they had some other games they had multiple turnovers. During this win streak, the last 3 straight games, they had 1 turnover against the Ravens, 1 turnover against the Dolphins, none against the Lions. They aren't as turnover dependent right now in their defensive success. And if the turnovers come back this week, watch out, Browns, because that'll be a problem.
And that's been an issue for Shedeur Sanders the last couple of weeks. He's throwing a lot of these passes that are getting tipped at the line of scrimmage and then intercepted. And so he's got to be able to avoid that. And that's the old cliche, right? We could say win the turnover battle is a path to victory for every team every single week if we wanted to. But I think for the Browns especially, like, this offense it has so many problems and just can't dig out of holes. You cannot set the offense back by committing those types of things. So absolutely have to protect the football. And I think there does have to be balance, to your point, with this offense. It can't all be on Shedeur Sanders, even though I think he can have some effectiveness in this game. They got to find a way to be able to run it, and that's easier said than done right now against the Steelers. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Browns and Locked On Steelers your first listens every day, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club to get Locked On Browns or Locked On Steelers with no interruptions, a members-only Discord access, and more, all for $5 a month or $50 a year. You can go to lockedonbrowns.supercast.com or lockedonsteelers.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes for our respective shows to learn more. That's going to do it for us. Big one on Sunday. Sort of a weird dilemma here for Browns fans, a moral dilemma, because you want to beat the Steelers, but if you lose, it guarantees you're going to be in the top 2 most likely in the draft order. So always a fun backdrop for the Browns and Steelers here in December. We will talk to you on Friday and respectively on Sunday after our games as well. Until then, have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 podcast network.